"You'll be fine in the garage," my stepfather said, tossing my pillow onto a plastic storage bin. My mother folded her arms. "Your stepbrother needs the bigger room. Stop acting dramatic." I stood there holding my blanket while he leaned against my doorway laughing. Then someone outside said, "Officer, that's the house." Seconds later, 2 police officers knocked on our front door. My name is Brooke Lawson, and I'm 33 years old. I grew up in a quiet Midwestern town, the kind of place where neighbors waved from their porches and everybody knew your business before you did. The streets were lined with old oak trees, and the sound of lawn mowers on Saturday mornings was as reliable as the church bells on Sunday. For the first 12 years of my life, things were stable. Not perfect, but stable. My dad left when I was 7, and my mom worked double shifts at a packaging plant to keep us afloat. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that felt like enough. Then my mother remarried. I was 12 when Gerald moved into our house with his teenage son, Kyle. Kyle was 14, loud, and confident in a way that filled every room he walked into. From the very first week, he became the one they always praised. Gerald talked about Kyle's future like it was already written in gold. My mother nodded along, eager to please her new husband, eager to prove this blended family would work. And me? I was the quiet one. I stayed out of trouble. I kept my grades up. I babysat for neighbors on weekends and saved every dollar in a small tin box under my bed. I didn't ask for attention. I didn't throw fits. I spent most of my free time writing stories in spiral notebooks, filling pages with characters who lived in worlds far away from mine. Writing was my escape. When the house felt tense and the conversations didn't include me, I could disappear into a paragraph and feel safe. After the remarriage, the household rules started shifting in small ways that always seemed to land in Kyle's favor. He got the better seat at dinner. His laundry was done first. His schedule determined when we ate, when we watched television, when the house had to be quiet. I tried hard to keep the peace. I told myself that if I just behaved well enough, if I was polite and helpful and invisible, things would eventually balance out. But the distance between me and my mother kept growing wider, like a crack in ice spreading slowly across a frozen lake. She stopped asking about my day. She stopped reading the stories I wrote. She stopped seeing me. I wasn't rich or glamorous growing up. I didn't have connections or advantages. But I had something they never expected. Quiet determination. The moment they pushed me into the garage changed the direction of my life forever. And not in the way they imagined. If you grew up feeling like the outsider in your own family, I want you to know that I understand that pain. It cuts deep when the people who are supposed to protect you make you feel like an inconvenience instead. Like you're taking up space that was never meant for you. A lot of people carry these experiences silently for years, burying the hurt because no one around them validated it. If that sounds familiar, I want you to be part of this community. Subscribe to this channel to hear more stories from people who lived through things they never should have had to endure. And if you're comfortable, let me ask you something. Was there a moment growing up when you suddenly realized that something in your family wasn't fair? Drop your answer in the comments. You might be surprised how many people share that same moment. The afternoon it happened started like any other. I came home from school, dropped my backpack by the door, and headed to the kitchen for a glass of water. Gerald and my mother were sitting at the table with serious expressions. Kyle was leaning against the counter with a smirk on his face, his arms crossed like he already knew what was coming. "Sit down, Brooke," Gerald said. I sat. My mother wouldn't look at me. Gerald cleared his throat. "We've been talking, and Kyle needs more space in his room. He's got his computer and his gaming setup, and it doesn't all fit. So we're going to move you to the garage." I blinked. The garage. My mother finally spoke, still not meeting my eyes. "You'll only sleep in there anyway. It's not that big of a deal." "But that's my room," I said. My voice cracked slightly, and I hated myself for it. "I've had that room since I was little. And now Kyle needs it," Gerald said flatly. "This isn't a discussion." Kyle didn't even try to hide his grin. He pushed off the counter and walked toward my bedroom like it was already his. Within an hour, his things were being carried in. His gaming monitor. His desk chair. His posters. My things were carried out. Not gently. Not with care. My clothes were shoved into garbage bags. My notebooks were tossed into a cardboard box. My small tin of babysitting money, I grabbed that myself before anyone could touch it. The garage smelled like motor oil and damp concrete. There was a single bulb hanging from the ceiling that gave off a weak yellow light. Gerald dragged in a thin mattress, the kind you'd use for camping, and dropped it between a stack of storage bins and an old bookshelf that was missing a shelf. There was no heater, no curtain on the small window, no lock on the door that connected to the house. "You'll be fine," my mother said from the doorway. She said it quickly, like she was convincing herself more than me. I didn't argue. I had learned by then that arguing only made things worse. So I arranged my blanket on the mattress, stacked my notebooks on an overturned crate, and sat there in the dim light listening to the sound of Kyle laughing in what used to be my room. The nights were the hardest. The temperature dropped sharply after dark, and the garage walls did nothing to keep the cold out. I slept in layers, sometimes wearing my school jacket over my pajamas. I could hear the family inside, the television playing, the clinking of dishes during dinner. Sounds of a life happening on the other side of a wall that might as well have been a mile thick. One evening the garage light stopped working entirely. I tried the switch 3 times. Nothing. I grabbed my homework folder and went outside to sit on the front steps under the porch light. It was the only place I could see well enough to read. I was halfway through a math worksheet when I noticed Mrs. Delaney across the street watching me from her living room window. She had this look on her face, the kind adults get when they see something that doesn't sit right but aren't sure what to do about it. I waved. She didn't wave back. She just closed her curtain slowly. 3 days later, I was sitting in the garage after school when I heard a knock at the front door. Then voices. Then Gerald's voice rising. I crept to the garage door that led into the house and pressed my ear against it. "We received a report about a child possibly living in unsafe conditions at this address," a calm voice said. "A police officer." My mother's voice came next, shaky and high. "That's ridiculous. Our children are perfectly fine. Ma'am, we'd like to take a look around if that's okay." I heard footsteps. I heard Gerald muttering under his breath. Then the door to the garage opened, and 2 officers stood there looking at the thin mattress on the concrete floor, the bare bulb socket with no working bulb, the cardboard boxes stacked around my sleeping area like walls of a fort no one had asked to build. One of the officers looked at me. "Is this where you sleep?" I nodded. He wrote something down. His partner asked a few more questions. I answered honestly. They spoke with my parents for a long time in the living room while I sat on my mattress hugging my knees. After the officers left, the house was silent for about 10 minutes. Then the explosion came. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Gerald shouted from the kitchen. "The neighbors are going to think we're criminals." My mother appeared in the garage doorway, her face red. "Did you tell someone? Did you go running your mouth to the neighbors?" "I didn't tell anyone," I whispered. "You must have done something. People don't just call the police for no reason." I looked at her and felt something shift inside me. Something small and quiet that had been holding on finally let go. She wasn't angry because I was sleeping on a garage floor. She was angry because someone had noticed. After the welfare check, things didn't get better. They got worse, but in quieter, more deliberate ways. The kind of cruelty that doesn't leave bruises. The kind that slowly teaches a child that they don't belong in their own home. The first change was meals. Gerald announced, casually, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world, that I would eat separately from the family. He said the dining table only had room for 4, which was a lie because it seated 6. My mother didn't argue. She set a plate for me on the washing machine in the garage and called it my eating area. I sat there every night, balancing a plate on a metal surface that vibrated when the spin cycle was running, while on the other side of the wall I could hear Kyle talking about his day and Gerald laughing at his jokes. During family gatherings, the arrangement became even more pointed. When Gerald's relatives visited, or when my mother hosted her book club friends, I wasn't invited to sit with them. Instead, I was expected to help. Cook the appetizers. Refill the drinks. Wipe down the counters. Clear the plates. Kyle sat on the couch with the adults, being introduced proudly. "This is our boy Kyle. He's doing great in school." No one asked where I was. No one asked why the daughter of the house was carrying a serving tray instead of sitting down. One afternoon during a barbecue, Gerald's sister looked around and said, "Where's your daughter?" My mother paused for half a second, then smiled and said, "Oh, Brooke prefers to help out. She's shy." She wasn't wrong that I was shy. But she was lying about the reason I wasn't sitting with them. I wasn't there because no one had saved me a chair. The humiliation followed me to school. There was a parent open house night in the fall, the kind where families walk through classrooms and meet teachers. Gerald came along, and so did Kyle. I remember standing near my English teacher's desk, hoping my mother would notice the short story I had pinned to the board. It had received the highest grade in the class. She walked right past it. Gerald stopped near a group of other parents and started talking loudly. "Brooke's been difficult lately," he said, shaking his head like a man burdened by a heavy responsibility. "We try to give her everything, but she's ungrateful. Some kids just don't appreciate what they have." I was standing close enough to hear every word. So were other students. Kyle noticed me listening and leaned toward one of his friends. "She sleeps in the garage," he said, loud enough for the group to hear. A few kids laughed. One of them looked at me with pity, which somehow felt worse. I went home that night and didn't cry. I sat on my mattress in the garage and opened my notebook. I wrote for 2 hours straight. I wrote about a girl who lived in a tower made of glass where everyone could see her but no one could hear her. The metaphor wasn't subtle, but it didn't need to be. It was mine. Then came the money. I had been babysitting for 3 different families in the neighborhood for almost 2 years. I kept my earnings in the tin box, tucked behind a loose panel in the garage wall. I had saved just over $400. It was my safety net. My proof that I could take care of myself. One Saturday, I reached behind the panel and felt nothing. The tin was gone. I went inside and found my mother in the kitchen. "Where's my money?" I asked. She didn't even look up from the counter. "We needed it for family expenses. The water heater had to be fixed." That was my money. I earned it. "You live under this roof. Everything here belongs to the household." I stood there, jaw tight, words trapped behind my teeth. Then Kyle walked through the living room carrying a brand new gaming console, the box still shiny and sealed. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. The timing said everything. I went back to the garage. I sat on my mattress. I picked up my pen. And I wrote. I wrote because it was the only thing in my life that no one could take from me. They could take my room. They could take my seat at the table. They could take my savings. But they could not take the words out of my head. And those words, it turns out, were worth more than any of them ever imagined. It started on a night when the cold in the garage was so sharp I could see my breath. I was sitting on the mattress with my notebook open, but for the first time in months, I didn't want to write by hand. I wanted someone to read what I was going through. Not someday. Now. I had an old laptop that a teacher had let me borrow for schoolwork. It was slow and the battery lasted about 40 minutes, but it connected to the neighbor's unsecured Wi-Fi if I sat in the right corner of the garage. That night, I created a free blog. No real name. No photo. Just a title I came up with in about 10 seconds. The Girl in the Garage. My first post was short. I wrote about what it felt like to hear your family laughing on the other side of a wall while you sat alone on a cold floor. I didn't expect anyone to read it. I wrote it for myself, the same way I filled my notebooks. It was a pressure valve. A way to breathe. But people did read it. Not many at first. A handful of strangers who stumbled across it and left comments that made me sit still and stare at the screen. "I went through something like this," one person wrote. "You are not alone," said another. Something shifted in me. It wasn't confidence exactly. It was closer to recognition. The feeling of being seen by people who had never even met me. I kept writing. Every few nights I would post a new entry. I wrote about the meals on the washing machine. About the open house and what Gerald had said. About Kyle mocking me in front of other students. About the money that disappeared. I never used real names. I never revealed where I lived. But I wrote every detail with raw honesty. The smell of motor oil in my sleeping space. The sound of rain hitting the thin garage roof at 2 in the morning. The texture of a cold concrete floor under bare feet. Slowly, the audience grew. 50 readers became 200. 200 became 1,000. People shared my posts on forums and social media. They sent me messages telling me their own stories of favoritism and family rejection. What they didn't know was that those lonely nights were building something bigger. I started learning about blog monetization, ads, reader donations, affiliate links. The income was modest at first, barely enough to buy a new notebook and some pens. But it was mine, earned with my words, hidden from the people who had taken everything else. Meanwhile, inside the house, my writing was a joke to them. Gerald once saw me typing on the borrowed laptop and snorted. "Writing your little diary again?" Kyle walked past and added, "Nobody's going to read that." My mother said nothing. She never did. I closed the laptop, smiled faintly, and waited until they were asleep to finish my post. The blog kept growing, and I kept quiet about it. The person who changed things for me wasn't a teacher or a counselor or a relative. It was Megan Ortiz, a girl I had known since second grade. We had drifted apart after my mother remarried because I had pulled away from everyone. I stopped accepting invitations. I stopped showing up to birthday parties. I became a ghost in my own social life because I was too embarrassed to explain what was happening at home. Megan found me one afternoon sitting behind the school gym during lunch, reading a book with my hood pulled up. She sat down beside me without asking. "You look terrible," she said. "Thanks," I muttered. "I'm serious, Brooke. What's going on?" I didn't answer right away. But Megan didn't leave. She just sat there, quiet and steady, until I finally started talking. I told her about the garage, about the meals alone, about the money. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "You're not staying there tonight," she said. "Come to my house." I did. That night and many nights after. Megan's mother didn't ask too many questions, but she always had a plate ready and a blanket on the couch. It was the first time in over a year that I had slept somewhere warm without earning it. Megan became my anchor. She encouraged me to keep writing. She read every blog post and told me honestly which ones were powerful and which ones needed work. She was the first person to notice that my readership was climbing fast. "Brooke, do you realize how many people are reading this?" she said one day, scrolling through the comments on her phone. I shrugged. "It's just a blog." "It's not just a blog. People are connecting with this. You're saying things that thousands of people feel but can't put into words." I didn't fully believe her. Not yet. But her words planted something in me that felt dangerously close to hope. Meanwhile, back at the house, nothing had changed. Gerald and my mother continued to treat me like a background character in their family story. Kyle was being promised a car for his 16th birthday. I was being reminded to scrub the bathroom before guests arrived. They had no idea what was building in the quiet corners of the internet. They had no idea that the girl they had pushed into the garage was slowly building a voice that would reach further than any of them ever could. And I wasn't ready to tell them. Not yet. I was planning. Quietly. Carefully. The same way I had always done everything. By the time I turned 18, I had already moved out. Megan's family helped me find a small room to rent above a hardware store downtown. It wasn't glamorous. The floorboards creaked and the radiator clanked at night like someone was tapping on pipes with a wrench. But it was mine. Every square foot of it was mine. I kept writing. Through college. Through odd jobs. Through years of slowly building a career out of words and honesty. The blog had evolved. It wasn't anonymous anymore. I put my name on it. My photo. My story. By the time I was 28, The Girl in the Garage had over 40,000 regular readers. I had been featured in online publications. I had spoken at events about childhood resilience and family dynamics. People wrote to me from all over the world telling me that my words had given them permission to name what had happened to them. Then I published the post that changed everything. It was a long piece. Over 3,000 words. I titled it Cold Concrete and Closed Doors. In it, I described in precise, unflinching detail what my childhood had looked like after my mother remarried. The garage. The mattress on the floor. The meals eaten alone on a washing machine. The babysitting money that vanished the same week a gaming console appeared. The police officers standing in the doorway, looking at a child's sleeping space with expressions that shifted from professional calm to quiet horror. And the welfare check. I described every second of it. The knock on the door. The questions. The silence that followed. The explosion of blame directed at me as though I had committed the crime of being noticed. I didn't use anyone's real last name, but I used first names. And I described the town. And the house. And the garage with the loose panel in the wall where I once hid my savings. Within a week, the post had been shared over 100,000 times. Comments flooded in. National outlets picked it up. People in my hometown started reading it. And people in my hometown started talking. That's the Lawson girl. I remember that family. I always thought something was off about that house. The recognition spread fast. Gerald's coworkers read it. My mother's friends read it. Kyle's social circle read it. For the first time, the family that had worked so hard to keep up appearances had those appearances ripped away by the one person they had treated as disposable. My phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. I saw my mother's number and let it ring 3 times before answering. "Take it down," she said. No greeting. No warmth. Just the sharp edge of panic disguised as authority. "Take what down?" "You know exactly what." "That story. That post. People are calling me Brooke." Gerald's boss asked him about it. "Our pastor brought it up at a meeting. You need to remove it right now." I sat at my desk in my small apartment. The window was open. I could hear birds outside and the faint hum of traffic below. Everything felt still. When it was happening, I said calmly, "No one in the house listened." "That was years ago. You're making it sound worse than it was." I described exactly what happened. Nothing more. Nothing less. "You're ruining this family." I paused. Then I spoke slowly, not out of anger, but out of a clarity that had taken me 15 years to reach. "You made a child sleep on a concrete floor so your stepson could have a gaming room. You took her money. You fed her on a washing machine. And when the police came to check on her, you blamed her for being seen. I didn't ruin this family. I just stopped being quiet about what already was." She hung up. I set the phone down. My hands were steady. I didn't cry. I had done my crying years ago on a thin mattress between storage bins. This was not a moment for tears. This was a moment for truth. And the truth, once spoken, doesn't need anyone's permission to stand. Looking back now, I can still feel the cold of that garage floor if I close my mind and let the memory in. I can still smell the motor oil and hear the rain tapping on the metal roof above my head. For a long time, that garage was a symbol of everything I lost. My room. My place in the family. My sense of belonging. But somewhere along the way, my understanding of it changed. That garage was where I found my voice. It was where I wrote my first honest sentence. It was where I learned that being alone doesn't have to mean being powerless. The girl who sat on that thin mattress with a notebook and a dying pen didn't know she was building a career. She didn't know that the words she scribbled by flashlight would one day reach people across the world. She just knew that writing made the cold feel a little less sharp and the silence a little less heavy. Today I live in a small apartment that I love. I have bookshelves filled with my own published work. I have Megan, who is still my closest friend and the person who believed in me before I believed in myself. I have readers who send me letters that make me feel like the loneliest parts of my childhood actually mattered. My family has tried to reconnect. Gerald sent a message 2 years ago asking if we could move past all this. My mother called on my birthday last year and spoke in the careful tone of someone trying to rewrite history. Kyle sent a friend request on social media that I declined without a second thought. I don't hate them. Hate takes energy I would rather spend on building. But I have firm boundaries now. The door to my life is not open to people who only knock when they need something from me. I was not broken by what they did. I was shaped by it. And the shape I became is someone they never saw coming. Someone who took the coldest, loneliest corner of the house and turned it into the foundation of everything she is today. If you grew up feeling like you didn't matter in your own home, I want to talk to you directly right now. If you were the one who was overlooked while someone else was celebrated, if your needs were dismissed while someone else's wants were prioritized, if you ever sat alone wondering what you did wrong to deserve less love, I need you to hear this clearly. It was never about what you did. It was about what they failed to do. Your worth was never determined by how your family treated you. It was always there, whole and intact, even when no one around you acknowledged it. And the fact that you survived it, that you're here right now listening to this, tells me something important about you. You are stronger than the story they tried to write for you. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Share your story in the comments. Tell me about the moment you realized you deserved more. Subscribe to this channel if you want to be part of a community that listens, that sees you, and that refuses to let anyone feel invisible. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, click share to help this story reach others who need it. Thank you for staying with me through this story. It's not easy to talk about, and it's not easy to hear, but stories like these matter because they remind us that we're not alone. If this video meant something to you, hit that like button and let me know. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts or your own experience. Every comment builds a space where people feel safe enough to speak their truth. And if you think someone out there needs to hear this, share this video. You never know who's sitting in their own version of a garage right now, waiting for someone to tell them that what they're going through isn't okay and that it won't last forever. We're stronger when we speak up. And we're strongest when we support each other.